The UFC light heavyweight division is in flux, and obviously, with John Jones vacating the title to move to heavyweight, we have Dominic Reyes and Jan Blachowicz as the two combatants that will fight for the title in a couple of months. But when a champion moves up a weight class and vacates the title, it's not only the immediate championship that needs to be calculated and determined, obviously, but the whole calibration of the landscape. And in a division such as light heavyweight in the UFC, which is a relatively lighter weight division in terms of top tier talent, this is really interesting. So enter Anthony Smith and Alexander Rakic. In terms of what would have been an interesting bout to understand who was potentially next. This was potentially a number one contender fight for the championship fight that hasn't been determined. So really sort of interesting things. So both guys coming off very different trajectories. Anthony Smith obviously having versed, Glover Teixeira a couple of months prior during the pandemic and not coming off with a little bit of a disappointing performance on his hand. Rakic hasn't fought in 2020. His last fight was against Volkan Ozdemir, and obviously a pretty tight split decision there. So look, different trajectories. I'd admit I hadn't seen a lot of Rakic. I've seen a bit of the highlight reels, and obviously he's a strong-looking individual. There's a lot of European talent in light heavyweight, and obviously having as many international fighters as possible is a good thing for the sport in totality. So look, enter the fight and the fight dynamics, and I think the interesting thing and the prevailing narrative that really came out to me in this particular fight is units of damage. And units of damage specifically when it comes to striking, I think as the sport has evolved and really as striking has evolved for MMA specifically, we've seen that the introduction of kicks, and specifically these calf kicks, are devastating, absolutely devastating. And we've seen it in the lighter weight classes. Alex Perez's, TKO with calf kicks kind of springs out to mind. But we've definitely seen it in the lower weight classes, and I don't think we've necessarily seen it in light heavyweight. I definitely could be wrong. There's a lot of fights going on. But the short of it is this fight was kind of determined in the first couple of minutes in terms of the two guys square off. There's a bit of distance management. There's a bit of posturing going on. But Rakic starts chopping Anthony Smith with these hammers, these absolute hammers against the calf. And obviously Anthony has a good sort of poker face, but he goes over and over and over and over again, to the degree that Anthony starts firing back with his own sort of calf kicks. But I'm not too sure if this was a deliberate sort of plan or if he started off and he just saw the momentum there. But he was chopping so hard that by the fourth or fifth or sixth time, I can't really remember, Anthony Smith fell down. It was like a sniper hit him. Pow! Smith was down, and Rakic basically capitalized in terms of a dominant position from the top and controlled the rounds from for the majority of the time. And look, I won't go into the dynamics of the top game for both guys, because initially there was talk from the commentary team that this wouldn't be the worst, position for Anthony Smith to be in, particularly because his legs were so battered in the first round. And for the duration of the first round, Rakic was able to maintain good control. I don't think he necessarily advanced his position. There was, moments of ground and pound, nothing overly devastating. But from Smith's end, that was really the beginning and the end of the fight. And I harken back to my point initially earlier in terms of units of damage. The damage that he received to his leg was so catastrophic, and obviously it wasn't profuse bleeding. It wasn't that he was limping, but it impaired Anthony Smith for the totality of the fight, that he really never was the same individual, and he couldn't get off in it. And from an individual, couldn't get off on the leg rather, and for an individual that really, prides himself in terms of strikes and knockouts and power, everything comes from the core and your legs, and he wasn't getting that. And in the second and third round, you could see it. There was, Smith came in with the intention of throwing bombs, and he definitely gave it a go, but he was severely compromised there, and Rakic was able to take Anthony Smith down in both rounds 2 and 3. Interestingly enough, like for an individual that is not known for his grappling and ground control, he was able to maintain a lot of dominant sort of positions. Again, as noted, Anthony Smith was compromised, so it begs to, there is an argument rather that potentially he just didn't have the explosion to kind of get up that he might have had if it wasn't. But that's all part of the fight game. And Rakic was able to grind out the wrong word. He was able to dominantly secure a relatively, and you got to say it's a relatively comfortable victory over Anthony Smith. In what was it's an impressive performance. I mean, is it the most entertaining performance? I mean, the jury is out there. It depends what you want to see, but it's impressive to see an individual. 12-2 now. He's 13-2. Move his way up into the ranks, and this was a strong feather in Rakic's cap. Really, impressive. It's an impressive all-around performance, very controlled, very measured. And upon the interview with some of the UFC guys at the conclusion, he did note that there was an emphasis in this training camp on wrestling and grappling, and that definitely showed. It definitely showed. But again, really was set up with those calf kicks, and it just goes to show how devastating some of these kicks are. There's no doubt that punches get a lot of the glamour and a lot of the finishing components, but when you layer the totality of damage and how you necessarily want to start layering your damage or the shots you're going to pick in the beginning, man, Rakic has laid a really good blueprint, especially in the light heavyweight division, that says that you can definitely establish the jab. That's definitely a technique that a lot of individuals use, but why wouldn't you do it with the kicks? If you have good kicks, you cover so much distance, and you can severely compromise the movement and mobility and your punching power of your opponent. So really strong there. So what's next for Rakic? Interesting, really interesting. Obviously, you've got Glover and Santos next, which is no doubt to me, again, a number one title eliminator for a championship that hasn't kind of been determined against Reyes and Yan. But I see I've actually interviewed this individual, and definitely check out the interview if you haven't, by an individual by the name of Yuri Prohaska, an exciting entrance to the UFC. And, both European fighters, that's dynamite. That's, to me, that's the fight to make, especially at the end of the year. I think Yuri and his management are having chats with the UFC. Rakic looked like he didn't sustain any damage. It was a 3-round fight as well. At the end of the year, November, December, tee these guys up, and you've got a production line of fights rather in the light heavyweight division, and things all of a sudden start looking a little bit more exciting for Anthony Smith. That's the second fight in a row. I mean, to be honest, I was a bit surprised when he was called to headline this. It's interesting. He's not necessarily at a crossroads, and he's, as an individual, in terms of character and morality and all that sort of stuff, he's a top-notch bloke, rather. So, look, I definitely look forward to seeing Anthony Smith, but he needs to go back to the drawing board and figure out a course of action. And I think his next opponent, needs to be. It's an important fight for Anthony Smith. But that's my synopsis of the fight, guys. Leave some comments below, give us a thumbs up, and subscribe, and chat soon.